My name is Jimmy Mesh. I'm a second year student in this program and I am focused on lighting and sound design. I was originally assigned to do the lighting design for Around the World in 80 Days. And this is some of the work that I had done before the show was canceled. January, we got our assignments and it was sort of late, so we started right into it. And so the director gave us a concept statement. We all read that. I went through and sort of looked at what Joan was looking for the show. And I started to gather some research images that we could show at our design meetings. We actually managed to get through every design meeting. So what I started by doing is pulling a lot of different images for all the different scenes and looks. Because Around the World is a very complicated show. They moved to a lot of different places. And the set was going to be very minimal. The costumes were going to be very minimal. So the lighting had to really show, all the different locations effectively and support the actors and the set and everything. So I went through and looked at all the different types of locations and provided some lighting research that I could show to Joan and the other members of the production team. We started to work what are called color keys, which is a way for me as a lighting designer to show what I want each scene to look like. And we started by just doing it without any constraints. Just going through and analyzing each scene, saying what direction do I want the light to come from. For example, the very first scene is they're in a small apartment in downtown London in the 1800s. So we wanted to sort of make it a really small world at the start of the show. And then we started to sort of build out the show as they start to move around the world. That's the name of the show. And so I started creating designs, showing where the water is and the land. And there's also a moment in the show right between the two acts where there's a giant typhoon. And so that's another one of the scenes that I had to work on. Because it's really hard to do that with a scenic element. So the idea is to use a lot of light to sort of create the sense of a giant storm where you're in the middle of the storm and all the water is moving around you. What we would have done from here, after I had completed all the color keys, is I would have started creating a light plot, which created basically systems of light for all these different scenes to work together, so that I can, once we've sort of gotten in past rehearsals and we start going into the production, I can start to light the show from all these different color keys for each scene, using sort of the same lights from different scenes, starting to consolidate all that together. And that's sort of where we left off, is right there.
Hello, I'm Everett Osterman. I'm a junior here at Western, and I did the scenic designing for Around the World in 80 Days. So one of the big things that we tried to do with this show is we wanted to create a lot of pieces that work together all to make a bigger image, like a tanagram puzzle. So we attempted to do a whole bunch of different pieces, moving them around and trying to figure out where they all fit, trying to figure out the best looks for each and every scene in the show, which there are so many of them. So trying to figure out the pieces to make our puzzle to come across the best that it could. We also wanted the floor design to be something that looked like they were popping off of a map. So what we did is we took a compass from a map and created a new world based off of that, and one that would look like the one that would come from the time period of the show. Some of the things that we really liked about the tanagram puzzles was there was so many ways that they could fit together and form. So what we wanted to do is keep our forms pretty simple. So we really liked having suitcases and crates and maybe a barrel or two to try and fix together what all of our scenery could be for the show. We also really like the idea of ropes and nautical themed items because there was so much traveling on boats during the show. So we tried out as many ideas as we could with all of these sketches, and we eventually came to the point of we wanted a couple of ropes, a couple of boxes, and some coat racks in order to give us some elevation into our design work.
Hi, I'm Meg. I'm a sophomore in the theater department here at Western, and I have an emphasis in sound design. And I was the sound designer for Around the World in 80 Days. For the process, my director was Joan Harrington, and she wanted to have a sound design with Foley, which is where you make the sound effects live and in the moment during the show every single night. So you would use found objects or objects that I would have made, and I would have done a lot of collaborating with our properties department in order to make that happen. So one of the things that I would have made for the show that I already have here is an ocean box, basically, or if I roll it this way, it would have been really easy to be able to make those sounds. And then over here on my left, I have my thunder sheet, because a lot of storms happen in the show. They have a lot of problems with weather. Basically, I would just take this handle here and kind of like wobble it around, kind of like that, to help create the storm effect. And then here, I also have our wind machine that we were going to use in the show to help create atmosphere and weather. So basically, it's kind of like one of those bingo machines, except it's wooded and open, then it has a piece of muslin draped over it. And then I can just crank it around here. To create a wind sound and to help give more atmosphere to the show.
Hi, my name is Casey Brown, and I am a senior here at Western, and I was the costume designer for Around the World in 80 Days. In my process, I first have to start off with some research, and for this show, there was a lot of research involved. I had to look into what people wore in the time period and what they wore all around the world. This show literally spans all over the world, so there's a lot of research involved there. So I went through and looked at every single country and what they would have been wearing at the time. My first step in my process is to create a costume plot. A costume plot helps a costume designer determine what characters are going to wear when they're in the show and what they might really have to wear according to the script. For this show, it was very important to create a costume plot because there is 35 characters but only 7 actors. Another thing about this show that was very interesting is everyone quick changes and shares pieces throughout the whole show. So I had to really focus on tracking where what piece might go, who might get it, and how it can be used in different ways. And after I do all my research, I start with my rough sketches. Rough sketches help to communicate between the costume designer and the director to show what the costume designer's vision might be, and the director will either say, I love it, or they'll say, I hate it. So I did 2 rounds of rough sketches for this show. I did a very simple first rough sketch, and then I did more intense rough sketches for every single character that appears.
My name is Claire Beeman. I'm a senior in the program here. I graduate in December, and my scenic design project for this year was for Sweat. As the scenic designer for Sweat, it's really important to know what the world is about. So the world of Sweat is really just a bar, and then all of the people who go to the bar work in a factory. So my design had to do with taking the factory and surrounding the bar with it. So you really can never escape all of your stressors. As the scenic designer for Sweat, it's really important to know what the world is about. So the world of Sweat is really just a bar, and then all of the people who go to the bar work in a factory. So my design had to do with taking the factory and surrounding the bar with it. So you really can never escape all of your stressors. So my set, as you can see in some of my, so these are called scenic renderings, which scenic designers make, and I would be giving this to a charged painter who would take these and turn it into beauty. Part of my design had to deal with making the audience feel like they are part of the bar. And the way that I wanted to do that and really encapsulate them in the universe was making the audience all enter through the front door of the bar, as you can see right here. And this unit would have been double-sided, so the inside of the bar we would have been able to project onto. There's some words and some language that the director had really wanted us to be able to see during the performance. So I have 2 projection screens on the set, one here, which would be on the back side of this unit, and our other projection screen is on the back of this backdrop here. Another part of scenic design, besides just making renderings, is making models. These are not only useful for all of the people working on the show, but to help the director and the actors really visualize the world that they're going to be playing in.
Hello, my name is Ryan Shankula. I'm a sophomore costume designer focus, and I was the costume designer for Sweat. All right, so basically what we talked about in our design meetings last year is, so one big thing about this show is that each day or each scene is a different day, and it states in the script like what the weather is that day, what's in the news, just very specific on what day it is. So we talked about in the design meeting adding a lot of layers. Basically, like for example, in this character, some scenes he'll be wearing shorts and t-shirts, but also we have to add layers for when it gets cold. So just basically adding jackets and sweatshirts to their costumes was a big part of how they will quickly switch between days. Also, we talked about how these characters, you know, they're not going to be dressing in the most high fashion. They're going to work at a factory every day, so they're basically just going to be dressing in clothes that are functional for working in a factory, and they're in their work clothes most of the time. They're not really in their everyday clothes all the time. Most of the scenes in this show take place in a bar after they just had a work day. So a lot of the times they will be in their work clothes. So for example, in this slide here, it shows like the uniforms they might be wearing. Further,
My name is Lizzie Soglin. I'm a senior theater design and technical production major with a focus on props. Last semester for Restoration Comedy, I was the assistant scenic designer as well as being the prop assistant for the show. One of the things that I got to work on was making this zither, which is a medieval baroque instrument. Primarily, I used AutoCAD to draft the zither and Photoshop to render what I wanted it to look like. These are some process shots from the show. So we had multiple different layers of plywood. There was some laser cutting involved in the final project. For the role of a prop master, it's my responsibility to go through the script and collaborate with the scenic designers and director as to what the needs of the show are for the props. For Sunday in the Park with George, which I was the prop master for, because it was double cast and we wanted to remove any possible risk of contamination, each of the pieces that Dot or George touched had multiples for each cast. Sometimes that meant there were 4 of the same prop. Because props are so hands-on, we really have to be safe and proactive about what needs to be done to keep the actors and the rest of the company safe.
Hi, I'm Jason Washburn. I'm a senior and a technical direction focus at Western Michigan. And I was the technical director for Sunday in the Park with George. What I did was I took Cameron's draftings and I put them in a different program called AutoCAD, which I would then go and take those draftings and make them so they're basic blueprints, and I'd give them out to the shop. Once I gave the draftings to the shop, I would then plan the load-in and what needs to happen in the specific sequence. So we got everything done correctly and most efficiently. And then after that was planned out, I would then be making sure that all the different set pieces were being built on time, they were being built correctly, that the carpenters were using the correct materials. Once we got to load in, I would then be in charge of load in and making sure everything was placed correctly. One of the special things that I got to do for the show was I got to work with the costume designer. And one of the fun things that needed to happen during the show was one of the characters, Dot, needed to walk out of her dress mid-song. So we had to make a special dress form that she could walk out of the skirt and it could stand there and stay completely standing and not fall over. So what I had to do was work with my mentor and with our costume designer, and we would trace out the bottom of the diameter of the dress, or the skirt at the bottom, and then we would take aluminum pieces and basically attach them to each other, making the cage that would hold the rest of the skirt. And then after we got the cage finished, we gave it to the costume designer and the other stitchers. If you look at what the design was for the outdoor production, you'll see that compared to the actual painting that was done, they do look very similar painting styles.
Hi, my name is Cameron Rogers. I'm a senior here at Western, and I was the scenic designer for Sunday in the Park with George. Sunday in the Park with George is based on a painting by Seurat. It's pointillism, which means that he didn't actually put any, he didn't blend any colors on the canvas. He painted with a set number of colors. In our original production, we had intended to use a lot of projections for this musical, and we had sort of an infinity slope drop that we intended to project most of the scenery onto and for the actors to perform in front of. Rather than having the actors just in front of the image, I wanted the world around them to also seem like they were in the painting. So the floor is something we couldn't have really projected onto. And if the entire set is going to be mainly a projection screen, I wanted the floor to be reminiscent of what was happening behind them almost at all times. So the floor was intended to be a pointillist representation of the grass. So this is one of my scenic renderings for the original production of Sunday in the Park with George. And you can see the actors are standing on platforms in front of what is a projected image of the park. And that projected image is on sort of an infinity slope drop. So it starts hanging from upstage, and as it moves its way downstage, it slopes down to kind of create an illusion of depth when maybe there wouldn't be with such a flat image. So this is the ground plan for Sunday in the Park with George, and it's in Shaw. Everything is drafted to scale and three-dimensionally, so we can get a better idea of what it's going to actually look like in the space.